Hey, this is William Tinkup and Ryan Leary, and you are listening and watching the You Should Know podcast. We're going to be talking with James today about a recent workplace study, a workforce study that he put together, his company Kahoot put together, and can't wait to kind of hear a little bit about the findings and what they learned when they put this together. So why don't we jump right in? James, would you do us a favor and introduce yourself and also introduce Kahoot?
Sure, will do, William. Thank you very much for having me here on the show.
Sure.
First of all, it's really great to be here. So, my name's James Micklethwait. I'm VP of Kahoot at Work. And for those of your listeners who don't know about Kahoot, Kahoot's actually one of the world's largest edtech companies. It's a game-based learning platform that basically makes it possible for anybody to create and deliver really engaging learning and communication experiences. So in the workplace, what that means is that Kahoot's used quite widely as a kind of different take on presentations. So one of the ways you can use Kahoot is to deliver presentations. So because of that, we've quite recently commissioned a piece of research where we spoke to over 1,000 professionals from the US who told us that they sometimes give presentations at work. And we wanted to just understand, what are the challenges you face and really get under the skin of what it takes to be a great presenter.
How many of them came back with PowerPoint?
Let's see. In America, I'm going to say, in the States, I'm going to say
90%?
No, I'm going to say 60% or more.
Google Slides was the other one? Is that your So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Kahoot. So Ryan just went to the website and found a bunch of games and thought he was on the wrong website. Fair enough. I would have done the same exact thing. So when you go to Kahoot, Kahoot.com, you're going to see games. Not that it's a gaming company. It's a way to teach. It's a way to learn. And with not just our generation, it's all generations. So it's just an easier way for people to learn. Let's go into the study itself. So you commissioned this 1,000 people. That's a lot of data, which is great. So tell us some of the top findings. What did you learn?
Sure, absolutely. And just before I do, I might to your earlier comment. I think as an observation, one of the things that really surprises me is that if you think about the format of a presentation, it's broadly been unchanged since the 1980s. And yet the context in which presentations are delivered has completely and utterly changed. So hybrid working, there's loads of discussion and debate about that, but it's very, very real. All our data shows that, very, very often you're in meetings or giving presentations, and either all of your audience or some of your audience aren't physically in there at the same place. And so I think our view at Kahoot is it's time for a change. It's just very, very strange. There's been that much change around the format, but the format itself hasn't changed.
You're right. It's interesting because in the 80s we used transparencies. But the format of a transparency in a slide, Google slide or PowerPoint slide, there's not much difference. It's just whether or not it's plastic and it's using light, or whether or not it's a slide, it's same stuff.
Same thing.
Yeah. Huh. And the other interesting insight I've heard someone mention is the thing about the PowerPoint format. It's obviously wildly successful. It's the dominant format. It remains that. But actually, it's sort of designed for selling, which is quite an interesting concept. That is what it's there to do. You're essentially selling.
Right.
Whereas our philosophy is more about involving the audience and having more of a discussion with the audience, which is quite a different experience.
Right. That's an interesting point. And as you say that, I'm thinking, even if you're using PowerPoint for a training and you're creating the PowerPoint or Google Slides or whatever medium you want, that's essentially a PowerPoint, you're selling that concept to the group of people. You're not engaging them because you're saying, well, how many people in the room do this? And how many, that's not really engaging from a learning.
It's the bloody pulpit. It's one person preaching to the folks in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Wow.
And there's that great saying that we hold quite dear to our hearts here, and that's tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn.
That's genius. That might be the title of the show.
Yeah, you'll have to send me that in an email so I remember.
That is absolute genius.
He hasn't involved me yet, so I haven't learned it. Do you have anything? Do you have anything for remembering? Because that's my issue. Like I'll learn, I just don't remember.
He,
There's a lot of science around learning, and actually, again, interactivity as a
Uh-huh.
format. There's a lot of learning science that shows that it's called the testing effect, and essentially, and you don't need a tool or anything to do this. If you read a book and you get to the end of the chapter, literally ask yourself, "What are my key? What are the three key takeaways from this chapter?" That process of both synthesizing, but then also forcing your brain to retrieve the information actually makes the neurons fire and it commits it to memory.
right.
So if you want to remember, actually asking questions of yourself or having other people ask questions of you is a really great way to make it stick.
That's interesting.
That's great. All right, let's
All
run
right.
into the findings. What did we learn?
Sure, yeah. So this research, as I mentioned, pretty broad study, and we call it the Superstar Presenter Spotlight Report, because at the end of the day, a lot of people seem to give presentations. And I think, a couple of high-level insights, and we can dive into this a little bit. The first thing we wanted to uncover was, what does good look like? And we had a hypothesis that actually everyone loves a TED Talk. And so we asked everybody, do you think that TED Talks are the gold standard of presentations? And maybe not that surprisingly, the vast majority, like 86% of the respondents, agreed with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
So TED Talks is what good looks like. Okay, great. But then the interesting thing is that when we asked the same group, would you feel confident to give a TED Talk tomorrow? Only
No.
9%. Said they would. Exactly. You're both shaking your heads. I can
Yeah,
see.
hell no. Yeah.
Right?
I'm
It's
in.
interesting.
I can do it.
Yeah, you could do it on the fly. I would have to prepare,
Yeah.
but the more I prepare, it's going to hit the shitter. Like I'm not going to be good if I prepare. I need to just get up there and be forced to
Right.
do it. But I can see that though, James, because I thoroughly enjoy. I can go through TED Talks all day, right? And
Yeah.
I'll learn and I'll remember, and I will remember those. They for some reason they click with me. But it also kind of instilled a fear in me that I need to be that good and that smart to be on the TED Talk stage, to give a TED Talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would be in that 9%.
Exactly. And that, so 9%, self-defined as literally rock star level. I'm ready to get on the TED stage tomorrow. So that's you, William. Congrats. I'm not one of those either. It would be if I did it, I'd need a lot of practice, and
he,
I'd
he would
be nervous about it.
he would get up there and not actually talk. He would just he would like
So
hold a sign or something like
no,
that.
but here's the thing. I did one of those actually. I did a
Uh-huh.
5-minute speech where I didn't speak.
He just held
So
cue cards.
that's all right. But I also think that the two of you. First of all, I love the data. Check. Ryan, I know you well enough that if you were to impromptu give a TED talk about fishing, you could do that
Yeah.
because it's your passion. James, I don't know you well enough to know your passions, but like, okay, say me in art, right? I could get up there and talk about art. I mean, I wouldn't need any practice. I could get up and just talk about art. So
It's a great point. Skiing for me.
skiing, oh
Yeah.
wow, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, okay, you could get up and talk about what's the difference between the French Alps and Switzerland. Like what like you could do this bit, and just say like you could do that because it's within your passion. I think it's when people, that's also the TED Talks that don't hit, is when it's
Right.
outside of their passion. Like they
Right.
knew they needed to do something, they studied, they learned, they trained,
Yeah.
and then it didn't hit as well because it wasn't in their heart.
They're getting on stage to get on stage.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because of what we just talked about in terms of like transparencies and Google, that's still a one-to-many approach. It's
Yes.
still even the gold standard as we discuss
Yes.
it. It's still the bloody pulpit,
Yep.
and it's just a better pulpit.
Yes. And we can dive into that in a second, actually.
Okay. Don't.
Because there are different techniques, and I mean, spoiler alert: TED Talks are a lot to do with storytelling.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there are other techniques in the toolbox. There's no silver bullet, I think, but we can dive into that in a sec. But if I just finish off on that, so of course there was a sliding spectrum. The 9% feeling like William, ready right now, and then there was a spectrum of confidence. But stepping back from it all, basically 50%, 1 in 2 of the respondents, in some way felt they needed help. Right? They just actually needed to be
Oh,
better
wow.
presenters, and we asked about presentation training in the workplace. 96% said that they would be interested in doing that. And I think that's another very interesting
That's cool.
observation, is that I don't think I've actually ever had presentation training in the workplace. And that's before we even start talking at younger ages. I have a good friend who's a professional public speaker, a public speaking coach, and he's done a TED talk on how presentations should be taught in the curriculum at school. It's not really it's not on the
Yeah.
formal curriculum,
Right.
and it
100%.
doesn't seem to be any way through our lives. And yet,
Yeah.
few people would argue that communication is one of the most valuable skills.
There's
It's
two
crazy.
things in there
100%.
to unpack. The kids in here in the U.S., they have to do it as like a capstone project
Right.
or whatever. So they do one presentation a semester or something like that. And sometimes it's even a joint presentation, so it's with many students.
Right.
But there is no training.
There's no training on how to and how.
That's right. It's
Let's
just
just
the
get up there and do
outcome.
it.
It's
Yeah.
the outcome. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, you have to send slides and blah blah blah. But there's no training. My best training, or I don't even know if it's formal training, was improvisational comedy, improv.
Yeah.
So I took a couple classes in improv comedy, for fun, actually, just for sport.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, that's fun.
Yeah.
That is actually, I mean, being
Yes.
upstage in front of people and just pulling a topic out of a hat, going, all
Yes.
right, pink elephants, let's go. Let's talk a little bit about pink elephants. Like, that gets you over the jitters real fast, but also it teaches you how to work with other people and work with the audience as well.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
but you're
I
right.
think
It's a
I think
miss.
that's probably the hardest. The comedy side, on the fly improv is probably the toughest thing to do. But the same friend actually was closely involved with Toastmasters, if you're aware of
Oh
that.
yeah, of
Yeah, yeah.
course.
Mhm.
Good group.
And one of the things Toastmasters do is table topics, which is
Yep.
Right.
just here's the topic, zero preparation, get up there and just speak for a brief amount of time, and that's a skill. I mean, it's a huge
Oh
skill.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love
But
it.
once
But
you master that skill, I mean,
I don't think you.
there's a difference between maybe not okay. Once you
Yeah,
get
yeah,
good at it,
right.
there is a
Comfortable.
difference between people that can and people that cannot,
Right,
and
right.
especially in the workplace. I'm
But teaching,
100% behind that.
James, I love this bit on teaching people, bring it into the curriculum of teaching kids at a very early age how to communicate.
Yeah.
Here's some information. It
Yeah.
could be World War II. It could be the Titanic. Whatever the information is, and how do I bring that to bear in front of a group of people, get them to learn and remember, to Ryan's
Mm.
point? How do I get them to engage in that content? Absolutely. It's a huge miss here. I can tell you, I'm in Texas. Ryan's in Pennsylvania. Huge miss in both of our states.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
probably a huge miss elsewhere.
And the final bit of insight, actually, that sort of it follows on from this, because obviously you get benefits if you had this training and we're a better presenter. You get benefits as an individual, but at Kahoot, we're in my area of Kahoot in particular, we're very interested also in workplace culture. And what we found is that actually there's a feeling amongst presenters that there would be wider benefits if everyone gave better presentations. It's maybe not that surprising, but around about half of respondents said that it would be an incentive for them to both deepen their own knowledge and share more knowledge if presentations just generally were a better and more effective medium, which I think is very interesting.
That tracks for me because
Yeah.
a bad presentation wastes your time.
Yes.
And everyone's busy. There's so many hours in a day. There's everything you have to do. All of a sudden, Jenny gets up and she does a presentation. You're like, I already know this. I already
Yeah.
know this. I'm like
It's
you're
bad.
wasting my time. And it's put in a format like, okay, I'm now going to take a nap, and it's wasting my time. So I can see that, James. That tracks for me.
Yeah, it's this is James. I could be way off here, but as you're talking and you're saying bad presentation, disengagement, and William, your example, I'm thinking. So back in my IBM days, we did a lot of design thinking, And you go into some sessions and you were just like, this is going to be badass. Like, we're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
In fact, my Google Photos just brought up a memory from, I think it was like 12 years ago or something. And it designed everything. Like, it was sticky notes everywhere. I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, I remember that specific day. I remember that day. We were in Argentina. We did the thing. It was super fun. Anyhow, there were some really bad ones.
Yeah.
Now, the good ones, I'm on top of my game. I'm giving ideas, I'm brainstorming, creativity is flowing. But
It
the
pulled
bad
you in.
ones,
Yeah.
the bad ones, I've got no interest. And there is a clear difference between engaged Ryan and not engaged
Disengaged,
Ryan.
right?
There's some episodes that we've recorded, James, where William's like, dude, you're gonna ask a question? I'm like, it's a boring topic. Like, I don't know. That's so bad. We're not mentioning any names on those shows, but
No. But
but it's true. It's true.
it's to your point. If you're at work and you're taking out time of your day
Yeah.
to displace some of the other things, it's got to be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things we see is in all walks of life, there is a war literally for attention.
Yeah.
And we need to take that very seriously. People's
Yeah.
attention, so many things competing for it, whether it's outside on the street, whether it's when you're using the internet, using your phone, or as you said, when someone's giving a presentation at work, it's still, there's a battle for attention, and you have to win your right, I think, to be listened to.
Yeah.
So we've hacked that one time. We've hacked that by no laptops and no phones. So again, that's kind of a forced strategy because it's again you're trying to get their attention. You're trying to win their attention, which I think is a great phrase, by the way.
And then you
And
need
it's
toothpicks to hold their eyes open.
yeah, but so yeah, you're right. You can take away their devices, but if you're still not winning their attention, they're going to be daydreaming and doing something else.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
Are you
Exactly.
seeing, James? You may get to this. I know we're taking you 97 directions. He's just like,
Of
I want to
course.
talk about this report, guys,
Well,
and we will, I promise. But or you may get to this later. Is there a difference between presentations, learning, and all of this inside the workplace based on generation?
Yeah, interesting. Yes, I think the answer is very, very simple and probably not that surprising. So this attention challenge is more acute the younger the audience is. So it's absolutely something we see consistently in the data. And also, I think the appetite to mix up the format, that change that I talked about that we're not really seeing,
Right.
is most welcomed. So, at Kahoot, we're quite about gamification, game-based learning, as I mentioned before. But by that I mean instead of just talking, you can drop in questions that are competitive, and there's a leaderboard in between. Some of your presentation slides, you can have a leaderboard and some competitive questions, for example. And Gen Z really, really respond to that very well, and the numbers are much higher for approval of Gen Z. Although it does work very well across all age groups. But yes, the younger demographic want to do things differently, and the attention spans are that much shorter.
Well, I used to think attention spans being shorter was a bad thing, and I've moved my thoughts around this because the Gen Z, I think it was 8 seconds and then 4 seconds. So it's something like that. They've lost seconds in their attention span between the generations, and I
Yes.
used to really think that was a bad thing. But what I've learned about that, or what I believe my current hypothesis is they get there quicker because they've consumed the internet since
Birth.
the day they arrived. They just get there fast. They have a consumption rate that's higher than the previous generation of millennials and Gen X. And so it's not necessarily it can be, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. You just got to if we're presenting, you've got to get to the point quicker.
Yes.
Right? So it actually forces you to do something different on your side, and it's all the things you're talking about, but it's like the pace. It's got to be faster because they're already that's where you can lose an audience, especially a Gen Z audience, is you just don't get there fast enough.
Yep.
Like you're telling a story and you're connecting dots, and people, of boomers and Gen X would love that.
Yep.
But whereas Gen Z, you lose them because it's like, okay, come on. I mean, these are kids that, they look at memes on their phone. They just scrolling through memes
Yeah.
on
Well, half of
Discord
it is
or
they don't want to look at us either.
yeah.
They're
But
like, this guy's a boomer, and they move on.
it's not. I mean, the way it was positioned early on about the attention span was it was all bad. This is all bad, and I don't think
I'm
it's
with you.
all bad. I don't think it's all bad. I think yes, it is different and it's shorter for sure, but that just means that I think it puts more of an onus on the presenter to actually be with them and move faster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pace.
All right. Should we let James move on to the next point?
Sure.
Sure.
we're taking him everywhere but the report.
He's doing fine. He's doing fine.
No, he's doing good. We're stopping him.
People are going to download the report. We're good. We're good.
Yeah,
exactly.
we're good. This is a great topic, James. We
But
love
I'm
it.
happy
Go
to,
ahead.
because those are the key points of the problem space, if you like. And then I think
Right.
the rest of the discussion is perhaps more interesting. Is what's the solution to all of this? How do people become better presenters, and what are the tricks? And so I think, I mean. Actually, I'm going to go back slightly just to recap on it. So
Sure.
when we dived in and said, okay, what are your pain points as presenters? So we're still slightly in the problem space. Then we'll get to the solutions. The number one thing was keeping audiences engaged throughout a presentation. More than 50% of presenters said that's the number one problem. So that's interesting. The second one was about nerves. Everybody gets, or most people, except with the Williams of the world, get quite nervous when on stage. So that was the second thing. And the third one, which was a little bit lower, but still a significant point, was that initial moment when you stand up, breaking the ice, developing a connection with the audience. So those are the top three sort of specific problems to solve. And then I think we can dive into solutions for each of those. So on the engagement one, I think then we can pick up on what we were talking earlier about the tools in the toolbox. And so we asked about, various tools. We asked the respondents, which do you think are the most important attributes of a great presenter? And that storytelling, perhaps unsurprisingly, came out top. I mean, one of the overall conclusions was there wasn't one standout. If you do this one thing, that's the answer. Actually, there was a relatively even distribution, and I'll go through some of them now. But storytelling was marginally the most popular choice of the ones that we offered, about 6. And I think that comes back to TED. I think TED is the format there. First of all, it's a format. If you notice it, it's never too long. There's been a huge amount of thought that's gone into that format. But it's all about telling stories, making it relatable. And that's a real craft and a real skill, because we as human beings just love stories. That's what's, kept people occupied around the campfire for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years since humans have been around. So storytelling is definitely one way. The next technique on the list in terms of popularity was actually involving the audience, which is what we talked about earlier. And that's where I think interactivity, and it can be, through just questions that you ask the audience, raise of hands, and it can be through tools like Kahoot, where you can ask people what they think, or you can go back over what you've said and actually try and reinforce the points that you made. So involving the audience, I think, is and interactivity is key as well. The other things that are important. Then we're sort of gradually going down the list. Humor was quite an important factor, quite a bit below those first two, actually. Those were the top 2 standout ones, storytelling and interactivity. But then humor, brevity, keeping it short, and then authority, interestingly, was the lowest of all of the ones that I've mentioned. And I think there's a real learning for anyone wanting to be a good presenter, is that one of the big traps of presenting is that you focus too much on yourself as a presenter.
You're all-knowing.
On your nerves, and I want to show that I know everything. Whereas in fact, you're already won on that. Most people in the audience don't know half as much as you. Exactly.
I've always gone off the notion of, look, I'm on stage. You're not that I'm better, but they expect something of you. Like, you don't go to a comedy show and expect them to be nervous. You expect them to come out, rip their shirt off, and be like, "What's up, everybody?" Like, you want them to be funny. Like, you're drinking, you're there for a good time. When I
Yep.
go to a presentation and there's a keynote, I fully expect that person to just be either hilarious, a superstar, be really stupid on stage, whatever it is. I expect it. I don't care what it is, but I get disappointed when they are very monotone, very
Mhm.
strict, physicist style, very like,
Yeah.
they're talking like an economist or something. Um, but that's what's kind of gotten me through. Anytime I had to get on stage or virtual or on stage, doesn't matter.
Well, you can flip authoritative with curiosity very easily.
And you're really good at that. You
Where
do
you
that a
basic
lot.
where you basically say, I'm not the authority, but I'll tell you what, I'm really curious about this.
Right.
Yeah.
And here's what I've learned so far. And then you're sharing, but Ryan, to your point about keynotes, the keynotes, it's a very simple formula in the sense of inspiration, education, and entertainment.
That's it. Yep.
A great keynote has those three elements.
That's great.
And so they're
Yeah.
able to pull at different points from those buckets, and so
Right.
they carry the audience through. And again, it is entertainment. That share of attention that James talked about. It's you are an entertainer, whether or not you like it or not. You are an entertainer, so you
You're on
have to think
stage.
about. You're on
Yep.
stage.
Yep.
James, one of the things I do in a lot of my presentations is it's off-putting, quite frankly, but I ask the audience questions. So at first, before I even started into a presentation, I'm like, "Hey, y'all showed up. Y'all have some questions? Like, what do you got? You got something in your pocket? You're
Yep.
here. Like, what do you got?" Because I'm good with improv, so I'm
Yep.
I'm comfortable. I should say I'm good. I'm comfortable being asked random questions, and what I'm trying to show the audience is like it's okay to ask questions. A,
Yep.
B, I'll give you the best answer I can, and we'll just kind of work through it together. And
Absolutely.
it loosens up the audience because
Yes.
they're used to the bloody pulpit. They're used to the person being authoritative and then just information coming at them.
Yeah.
And when you can tease a question out of them at the very beginning, it helps set the stage for the rest of the discussion or the rest of the presentation, because it's like, come on, just ask a question. What do you got? What do you got? And
Yeah.
people will ask questions.
I'm
And
not fanboying.
I know I've had that turn against me, by the way.
Well, I'm not
I've-
fanboying over William here, but I will say the last presentation at TalentNet
yeah.
around tech stacks, James, everyone in there is a technologist at this event, and they're all building their tech stacks, right, on for their talent acquisition and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he just goes in and says, how did you say it? Something around, like, don't use the word tech stack, but he said it in his words,
Yes. You
which,
sound old
yeah, but
every
it
time you
was,
say it.
but you're really good at that, right? So you're, and it always works for you. I've seen it work for other people. I've also seen it bomb for other people, where they try to be contrarian to everyone else in the audience. There's 300 people in the audience. You're like, yeah, everything you're doing is wrong,
Right.
and this is why.
Mine was
Yeah.
so James. It's curiosity, I think. Thanks, Ryan. But I think it's curiosity that 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 gets the audience, or it's these are all levers to be pulled, and curiosity is one where they can relate to you, and
Yes.
so you're not you're not the person that's coming down from the mountain like Moses and giving them the answers. You're just telling them about where you're at and why it's important to you and why you might think it's important to them.
Yes, exactly. And I think technology has an interesting role to play here, because what it does allow you to do is have a conversation actually with hundreds of people
Right.
simultaneously. Just a word cloud, for example, as an experience is a great way. In a word, what do you think of this topic? And then just straight up on the screen, visualized, you've got the collective consciousness and view of the audience, and then you've got a connection straight away. And as opposed to, it's not all about tech all of the time, but traditionally the best you could do is pick someone in the audience and that one person there engaged, but you get everybody participating and involved in it. It's a different level of connection, I think.
I love
So,
that.
James, I don't know where we're going next because it's your report.
Yep.
Got it. All right. Check that off. But I have to ask, what so an organization says, you know what, we need better presenters
Yeah.
in our workforce. They all go through trainings, they all become really good presenters, say. Now what happens if everybody's a great storyteller in that building? Where I mean, is that good? If the whole building's full of storytellers at that point?
I think so. And like I said, remember, storytelling is one tool in the
That's right.
toolbox.
Yeah, brevity. Yeah,
Brevity,
Yeah.
involving the audience. But to answer your question, being a better presenter or
communicator,
communicator, exactly.
Communicator, yeah.
Yeah.
So it creates more efficiency, brevity in the organization, production.
engagement,
Yeah, but I mean,
engagement.
exactly, engagement, or what happens if a salesperson is a better presenter communicator? They sell more, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's literally what happens if somebody's in a call center? Better customer service.
Right.
It's these are very hard business metrics and business outcomes that come from this, not just a kind of soft
Mm.
skills for the sake
Right.
of it.
So this is
If you're
I
pitching for your business, if you're a founder, for example, and you're pitching for investment, it's this kind of skill that
right.
actually closes the deal.
That's right.
Would this then essentially be more effective? Maybe I don't know if the survey shows this, but would this be more effective for a customer service rep, for example, or a sales rep, for example, to become a better communicator, go through this type of training rather than customer service training?
I think anybody. Excuse me. Go ahead, answer it, James.
He's
You're
like,
the
I'm going to
expert.
answer for you.
Um, uh,
I don't
this survey doesn't specifically answer that question, but my
Yeah.
experience at Kahoot, which is an innovative approach to learning, what we do know is that when you use our solutions to train sales reps or customer care reps, which is why I mentioned this, and so they have better product knowledge, they understand the product, then they sell better. So
Right.
it's slightly different, but
Yeah.
I would have a strong hypothesis that what I said
Yeah.
is true because
Yeah. There's more confidence. They speak better. They're able to hold conversations, control conversations.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't think that communications. I don't think there's a downside to being a better communicator for anyone. I mean, think
Mm,
about or marriages. If how many marriages have failed through the years because of just poor communication, right? So, like, I'm looking at that in organizationally and saying the EA, the secretary, the person that's in finance, procurement, whatever, everyone could be a better communicator.
yeah.
Which I don't think there's a downside to being a better communicator.
Yep.
I can't see one at
mm.
least.
Yep.
Okay. All right, James.
Okay.
What else?
So
Where are we going next?
so I guess we've got this engagement problem. We talked about how
Right.
do you solve the engagement problem. Storytelling is important. Interactivity is important, and I think coming into that is actually there's a theme that I've realised is important through this research and actually working with some experts, and that's actually the importance of mixing it up. So at Kahoot, we're working with a wonderful gentleman called Matt Abrahams. He's a Stanford lecturer of strategic communication. And so he knows 10 times more than I know about this subject. We've been specifically working with him in our product to try and understand what makes a great interactive presentation. And so one of the things he's told us, for example, is that he believes that the attention span, basically, you need to mix it up
Right.
after about 6 to 8 minutes. That's
Yeah.
the time when everybody's just human and, different demographics, different settings. So remote versus in person, it does vary. It can be maybe shorter than this. But on average, that is a rule of thumb. And I think that's fascinating because that says, to state the very obvious, very few presentations I ever hear are only 6 to 8 minutes, right? So the average presentation is longer than the average,
Right.
optimal time. And so the only solution to that is that you actually need to mix it up. So he is a big fan of this. Yeah, it's great. Tell a story. Then, okay, let's pause. Let's see. What do you think? Let's get input from the audience. Let's involve the audience.
Is there too
Then maybe
fast?
use some humor. So you mix up your toolbox in stages to
Right.
create a more varied experience, and that's how you solve the engagement problem.
Is there too fast? Does he says every
It's short
6?
of a time.
Can you do every 2 minutes or every 3 minutes? Like, is there a floor to what you can do with mixing it up?
He hasn't said anything about that. I guess there comes a point where it becomes a bit just overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and certainly he has He's also guided us, for example, and for most people this isn't a danger, but because we're coming from the interactivity space, you can now combine your slides with interactivity.
Right.
There is such thing as too much interactivity. Too many slides is not good, but also too
Yeah.
much interactivity is not helpful either. So it's genuinely about finding a balance between the two.
And
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, y'all are doing a webinar with him in July around this topic, right?
Exactly right. Yes. So Matt's going to be. It's a completely free webinar, July 10, and there'll be a link. I think you're going to add to this podcast.
Yeah, we can add a link.
Thank you. Matt's a guest speaker, and he's going to be giving some great tips on how to level up your presentation game.
I think Ryan, we should show up.
Probably should. Yeah.
we
can.
we
How
should probably
about
be there.
James? How about we introduce him and we make it about 9-minute introduction and just start off on a wrong foot? That would be pretty hilarious.
Oh,
I
I
kind
hate
of so William, as
introductions.
you were saying, too short. I was thinking the same thing because what I was kind of comparing it to in my mind was TV, regular TV with
Yeah.
Right.
commercials.
Yeah.
Commercials aren't 5 minutes long, right?
No.
They're 30 seconds. Some are 15, some are 10,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's always about 3 minutes or so,
Yeah.
maybe longer, I don't know, between the commercial and the next segment of the show,
Yeah.
because obviously there's enough that there's research, I'm sure, behind that if it's 4 minutes,
Yeah.
I'm gone somewhere else. 3
Yeah.
minutes, I could wait. 90 seconds, not enough time to go to the bathroom, right? There's
Yeah.
research there, and I think it's kind of the same with presentations. Or
Interesting.
trainings. Yeah, it's like, okay, go this long, don't go this short. It's
Right.
too much. And I'm thinking we've had presenters over the years that will just talk about, I don't know, call it like 40 things to do in this, and it's like 2 minutes a thing, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
retain any of that. But if
Right.
you would have done 5 things and spent 6 minutes for the next 30 minutes, that's enough time for me to process it, think about it, ask myself some questions, and maybe
This
ask you a question.
this is
Yeah.
so helpful. This
Yeah.
is so many people. Yeah. I could see where, just reading the report and understanding the research can actually help people.
Yeah.
I hope so.
And I never say that about research too much. It's actually
No,
pretty
it's
interesting.
well, it's rare. It's
Yeah.
rare. Most of it is, again, 39% of the people say so and so, but this is again a skill
Yeah.
that we weren't taught in grade school or high school or college or whatever university.
Oh no,
Um,
I took a public speaking class in college, and I will send you a photo.
oh, I have
I've
a
got
public
a
speaking merit
VHS.
badge.
It says public speaking final, whatever, capstone,
Oh yeah,
whatever it said, and it's on a VHS tape. And I can't play it because I don't have
yeah.
a VHS player.
But did
And
they
it's
teach you? But did they taught
well, it
you
was
how
a
to say?
class on public speaking. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
but they didn't really teach. It was more like,
no,
James, it was basic as basic could be, right? And this is third year in college, so that was communications, and so we've gone up the rung here. And this was how to break the ice, and how to do a joke, and how to raise your voice and lower your voice, and change your pace, and like I didn't do any of this on the tape, and I know it's on the tape, and I want to get it so I can play it for the kids. Um, Plus, I had hair, so they'd be totally freaked out. Number one.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
No, it's amazing working with these experts on this topic. Just
Mhm.
the range of techniques that they
Right.
have, like you said, literally. And Matt talks about using words like involving words. As where you involve the audience, and you use words like we instead of I. It's little small things like that. Tone of voice, as you say, these all make a big difference. So it's so worth, I think. Investing some time in listening to, watching people who are real experts on this, because it often doesn't take very much. It's just you just got to take the time. A few very practical, simple tips. Try them out, and it's pretty easy to get
Yeah.
started. The
James.
second theme is engagement. But I think the second big insight I wanted to share really, and these are the big two. One around engagement, so mixing it up, interactivity, storytelling. We covered that one. The second one relates to nerves, right? If you remember, that was the second big pain point. A lot of people are nervous presenters, and again, there are a lot of different, a broad range of techniques with doing this. Matt, for example, talks about deep breaths is super important just to because it actually harness the nerves. Nerves are not necessarily a bad thing. It's adrenaline, it's performance,
Right.
but the way you breathe can make a big difference to the way you deal with nerves. But what our research showed that I found very, very interesting was a very striking correlation between the presenters who are super confident, the ones that are ready for the TED stage, and the amount of feedback that they get on giving a presentation. So what we found was that, the majority, the vast, like 80% of them, I think it was 80%, 83% of those rock star presenters either always get feedback after giving a presentation or often. And that's so much higher than all of the less confident presenters. And it shouldn't be a huge surprise, I guess.
Right.
In work generally, we always talk about giving more feedback.
When you say get feedback, are they soliciting feedback? Are they soliciting feedback?
We didn't ask them about that. We just said, how often do you get
They receive
feedback?
it. Yeah, they
Right. They
receive
just
it.
receive it. Okay.
Receive feedback. So you receive feedback whether you've asked for it or whether someone just gives it to you. But I think
what's
again,
interesting there? Go ahead, finish your thought, James.
I was just going to say that what is exciting, I think, for us about that is the way that interactive technology can help with that. Because if you have an experience where you present for a bit, and then you either ask people, as a competitive question for points, you can gamify it. What's the key takeaway of what I was just talking about in the last 5 minutes? Not only do you get real-time feedback on your communication style, but also you are landing the key takeaways. And for those people who get the answer wrong, they then become very clear on what it is you want them to know. So actually, with an interactive presentation, which is this new format we are very excited about now and building out in Kahoot, you do have this ability to get real-time feedback, which is both very powerful and actually, I do it all the time, quite humbling, because you'd be very surprised. You talk, you think you're speaking very clearly, and then you ask the audience, what was my key point? And then only a third of them get the right answer. It's great. It's very humbling.
I've done this in virtual reality when we're presenting in virtual reality, and they've got like the audience can give you applause or question marks and all kinds of stuff as you're speaking.
Yes.
All of a sudden you see these hearts going up and claps going up, and you're like, okay. But I think, James, one of the things I've observed about feedback is the less confident, and let's just say the people that just didn't do a great job during their presentation. One of the reasons, I believe, this is a hypothesis, that the reason they don't get feedback is people have given up on them. So they're like, you don't know, you haven't mastered your craft. There's no need for me to go tell you about you haven't mastered your craft. Whereas the people that do a great job, they come up to them after a show or after an event or after their presentation, and they have more questions because they're engaged, or it's validating for them to then to recognize that someone's done something well, they actually know their craft, and to then be with them and talk with them and to learn something more. So it's, I think, first of all, I think anything you can do to do that in real time is genius, because it is delayed not gratification, but it is delayed feedback. Because it's after the bit, however long that is, it's now someone will either come and talk to you or not.
Yes.
But what I've observed with others is they don't go and talk to the people that I say failed or bombed. It's really that it was subpar, and I think it's just maybe this is an American thing. They just give up. They've given up on that person.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to waste any of their time.
I think that's fair. If you're ever wondering how a presentation went, that's not a good sign. It's probably the truth, because that means that no one's come up, as you said, and the reason why they haven't come up is exactly as you. I think that's right.
Right. Well, let's do one last question. Ryan, do you have a last question?
Go for it.
Okay. So what's the best way to start down this process to teach people communication skills? Like if people listening to the show or watching the show are thinking, okay, my organization, we're horrible at this. Where do they start?
I think that's a great question. I think we're lucky to live in the world that we live in, because there are so many now just freely available, really brilliant world authorities on this. So I think it's about finding great individuals and communities to be part of. So I mentioned Matt. We also work with another thought leader called David J. Phillips in Europe as well. And we're also planning to build a community, which is very specifically with involvement from these and others. I'm sure will join as thought leaders, providing relevant and helpful content. So I think it's the first step, of course, is you've got to decide that this is a skill that matters to you. It's all about the why. This matters to me, and I believe it's going to get clear on why you think it's going to make a difference. To your point, Ryan, earlier, if you're clear on that, then that provides the motivation. Then go out and find thought leaders, podcasts to listen to, plenty of resources and webinars, both free and paid. When you find somebody who you resonate with, and everyone has their different style on this, and it's not like there's a right or a wrong answer, just listen to a few, find someone whose style is, and then just go deeper with that individual. And then finally, it's about a lot of the things we talked about here. Practice, like any skill, it is about practice, but it's about practicing in a smart way as well, getting feedback, reflecting on that feedback, iterating and improving. I think those, it's a fairly obvious set of things to say, but those are the right things to do.
Yeah. I do have, James, one last question, and then I lied. Sorry, William. For practicing to become a better presenter, right? If I'm taking all of your recommendations, is practicing presenting virtually the same as presenting in person? And I know I'll give my thoughts here. There's a different confidence, I think, personally, on camera as opposed to just having a headset on and not having a camera versus being in person on stage somewhere. So I'm curious, as you're bringing people through these trainings, is there a different way to practice for virtual versus in person?
That's very interesting.
That is a great question. And there is, I think it's, there are some, I think you have to adapt your style is the answer. And the short version is it's this engagement problem we talked about is 10 times more acute with a virtual audience.
Right.
In a separate piece of research that I won't dive into now. I mean, we asked people what they were doing when the videos are off, and it's very striking. Like literally, not even on another meeting, searching for another job. Everything is happening. So the engagement problem is much harder. And what that means is that everything we've said, you need to dial up. So you need to mix it up more and more. You need to involve people more and more. You should talk for even shorter amounts of time. So the whole 6 to 8 is probably great for in person. Maybe it's less virtually.
2 to 3 or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it seems like a combination of audience specific and medium specific, right?
Yes.
So the medium, okay, virtual, in person, whatever. And then who's on the other side of this? Are these, like senior executives that already kind of know, like you can start off at a higher click, or are these beginners and they're just out of college and they don't know as much, so you have to kind of really pace yourself and bring them up to play. So I think it's, to me, Ryan, I think I would probably look at, okay, what's the audience? And then what's the medium? And I love the way James tackled the medium, because it's like, okay, hey, you're doing this over Zoom.
Right.
Cool. You can still get there, but you can't get there in the same way that you did on stage.
Yeah. That's a great point. And I think for any presentation, if you start by thinking, who's the audience, and try and empathize, why are they here, and what are they are they interested in? That is a fantastic place to start, and then good things will follow if you just start with that. And you can actively ask them that question and make that connection. That's one way of doing it, or even just thinking about it. That's a fantastic place to start for sure.
I could talk to James all day, but he's got stuff to do.
If I could say one more thing, is just that I would just very much encourage people to try out an interactive presentation. It is a new form. We're trying to shake things up here. Try out an interactive presentation. Doesn't have to be with Kahoot. There are others that do it as well, but just try it out, because if we go right back to the beginning, the storytelling, the humor, those are things that a lot of people struggle with, and some will always struggle with it. If you have an interactive presentation format, we believe it makes, it opens up the possibility to deliver a really impactful presentation to a much broader section of the population than a TED Talk, for example, which is just not going to be for everyone. So this is an invitation for anyone. If you want to up your skills game, try an interactive presentation.
I did. I started off with a joke with my dad's eulogy, and it was fantastic. Like people, it cut that thick air in a typical eulogy where people are really somber and all that stuff. I just started off with a joke, and then started to tell stories about my dad and I, and people laughed, they cried, the whole bit. But just the idea of just like, hey, that's levity, right? The idea of like, we're here, it's serious, I get it. However, let's have fun with this.
Yeah.
And let's we don't the man's passed. That's already done.
Right.
We can't change that. So people appreciate it. It's really weird to get people thanking you after a eulogy.
Yes.
Like that was a trip. not accustomed to that.
Put a feather in your cap on that one.
No. In fact, I had other people in my family say, "Can you come do my eulogy?"
Can you
I'm
do
like,
mine?
well, no, if I want to be good at this. But anyhow, James, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This has
been
been
a pleasure.
absolutely wonderful. The topic's been wonderful. You've been wonderful. The research, everything, and everyone, remember the webinar in July. We'll get dates and links and all that stuff. But thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.